Have you ever noticed how strange it is that when you have nothing in your account, you feel fear, but when you start saving a little money, the fear doesn't decrease, it increases? It sounds contradictory, but that's exactly what happens. When you're at zero, the feeling is desperation. But when you manage to save 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 reais, something shifts inside you. Instead of peace, tension shows up. Instead of security, you feel afraid of losing it. You start checking your balance constantly. Any small expense feels like a threat. You don't want to touch that amount, but you're not even sure what it's really for. And what if I told you that this discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, but that your brain is still operating in survival mode? What if the problem was never how much you earn, but how your mind reacts to the money you have? Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to explain can completely change the way you manage your money, and it has nothing to do with complicated spreadsheets or magic formulas. When you start saving money, your brain activates a silent alarm. Before, when there was nothing to lose. Now there is, and the human mind hates losing more than it loves winning. So that amount that should represent peace starts to represent risk. You begin thinking, what if something happens? What if I need this tomorrow? What if I spend it and then come up short? Without realizing it, you enter a cycle of constant tension. This happens because while the amount is still small, your mind remains on high alert, as if it's defending itself from an imminent danger. The emotional part of your brain takes control, and you make decisions based on fear, not logic. There's a point when this switch flips. There's an amount that makes your mind move from survival mode into rational mode. It's not a magic number, that's the same for everyone, but it's the moment you understand that the money isn't fragile. It won't disappear with every gust of wind. It's not there to be worshipped or kept untouchable. It's there to protect your mental clarity. The true function of an emergency fund isn't to pay bills. It's to prevent your brain from panicking when a problem shows up. It's to allow you to think before you act. That's what changes everything. Efficient financial control doesn't start by cutting out coffee or canceling everything that brings you joy. It starts by organizing your mind so that money stops being an emotional threat. Because when you're under stress, you make bad decisions. You finance things without thinking. You accept abusive interest rates just to solve things quickly. You ignore the problem until it turns into a snowball. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's excess pressure. Maybe you're living exactly this right now. You work, get paid, pay bills, try to save a little, but it never feels like enough. It feels like you're always chasing, always behind, always owing something, even if it's just peace of mind. And the worst part is that no one talks about this in a simple way. They only talk about investing, multiplying, growing. But how can you think about growing if you're still trying to breathe? The first step to managing your money efficiently is to stop treating everything like an emergency. Not every expense is a disaster. Not every bill is the end of the world. But if you don't have a clear system, everything feels urgent. And when everything is urgent, nothing is organized. Think about this. When you receive your paycheck, what happens in the first few hours? You feel a temporary sense of relief. Then you start mentally distributing the money, rent, electricity, water, credit card, groceries. If there's anything left, you think about saving, but saving becomes the last priority. And what's a priority always comes first. What's left over is never really left over. Managing money efficiently means flipping that logic. It's not about saving what's left. It's about deciding in advance what stays. Even if it's a small amount. Even if it feels insignificant, because what builds stability isn't the isolated amount. It's the automatic habit. As long as you depend on willpower, you'll fail. Not because you're weak, but because willpower runs out. After a tiring day, after an argument, after frustration at work, you don't want to make hard choices. You want relief. And many times, relief means spending. That's why efficient control is built on simple systems. As soon as the money comes in, part of it already has a fixed destination for your emergency fund. No thinking, no negotiating with yourself. You don't decide every month whether you're going to save. You decide once and automate it. That removes the emotional weight from the decision. And here's something almost no one realizes. Your emergency fund isn't just for big emergencies. It's there to keep small problems from becoming huge crises. A flat tire doesn't have to turn into debt. A simple repair doesn't need to become an installment plan with interest. When you solve the small issue immediately, you prevent the big one from being born. But there's another silent mistake that hurts your financial control. You mix everything together: checking account money with credit card money, savings with available balance, dreams with obligations. When everything is in the same place, your mind can distinguish what can be used from what needs to be protected. And that creates constant anxiety. Separating things means organizing your mind. It can be in different accounts or simply in clear categories. What matters is that when you look at your everyday money, it isn't mixed with your security. That completely changes your sense of control. Now let me ask you something difficult. Do you actually know how much your life costs per month? Not how much you earn, how much you need to keep the basics running. If that answer isn't clear, your anxiety will never leave, because you're fighting an invisible enemy. When you discover your real cost of living, something powerful happens. You stop imagining catastrophes and start working with real numbers. Maybe you'll realize you need less than you thought. Maybe you'll see that you need to adjust something, but clarity always reduces fear. And this is where true efficiency begins. It's not about earning more first. It's about organizing better what already passes through your hands. It's about turning money from something emotional into something structural. It's about stopping reactions and starting anticipation. At first, it seems too small to make a difference. Saving a little, separating categories, tracking basic expenses. But over Chimi, your mind starts to relax. You realize you're no longer in the dark. You know what's happening. And when your mind relaxes, your decisions improve. You don't accept just any offer. You don't buy things to relieve frustration. You begin choosing calmly. And that, little by little, changes your financial future. Efficient control isn't about living squeezed forever. It's about creating mental space. Because when you have mental space, you see opportunities, you negotiate better, you plan better, you say no when you need to. Maybe today you feel ashamed of your situation. Maybe you feel like you should already be further ahead. But guilt doesn't organize bills. What organizes is clarity and system. And deep down, what you want isn't a high number in your account. It's to sleep without fear. It's not feeling your heart race when your phone vibrates with a bank notification. It's not avoiding opening the app because you're afraid of what you'll find. Managing your money efficiently is building that peace little by little. Not all at once, not with a miraculous turnaround, but with small automatic decisions repeated every month. In the next section, I'm going to dive deeper into something almost no one notices: how small, invisible choices are draining your financial energy and keeping you stuck in this cycle, even when you try to do everything right. For now, I want you to breathe and think, are you living in financial survival mode? Or have you started building rational mode? Because that difference changes everything. So stay with me, because now we're going to enter the part almost no one sees but. That's draining your financial energy every single day without you realizing it. There's a type of expense that doesn't look like a villain. It doesn't seem dangerous. It doesn't seem irresponsible. On the contrary, it feels deserved. You work all day, get tired, solve one problem after another, swallow frustration, hold in worry, and at the end of the day, you feel like you deserve a reward. It might be different takeout, a small online purchase, an installment that fits the budget, a subscription that barely weighs on you. Individually, none of this seems wrong. The problem is that these decisions aren't born from logic. They're born from exhaustion. And when you make financial decisions while tired, you're in emotional mode. In that mode, money becomes anesthesia. It becomes temporary relief. But every small relief creates a future commitment, and the future starts to feel tighter. You don't notice it right away, but you're accumulating small promises against yourself. Maybe you've lived this. The month starts calmly, but in the second half, everything feels tight. You start doing mental math at the grocery store. You avoid checking your balance. You think, next month, I'll organize better. But next month arrives with the same pressures. And the cycle continues. What almost no one explains to you is that true efficient financial control begins by protecting your mental energy, not your money. Because if your mind is exhausted, you'll sabotage any system you try to build. You'll promise to track expenses and stop by the third week. You'll promise to save a fixed amount and dip into it at the first sign of tension. So the question isn't, how do I save more? The question is, how do I reduce decision friction? The fewer decisions you have to make, the better your control works. Imagine that every month you have to manually choose what to pay, how much to save, how much you can spend. That consumes energy. Now imagine that as soon as the money comes in, it automatically splits into 3 clear parts: survival, security, and life. Survival is what keeps your home running. Security is your emergency fund. Life is what you can use without guilt. When these 3 parts are separated, you stop mixing fear with pleasure, because one of the biggest sabotages of financial control is guilt. You buy something simple and then feel bad. Guilt creates tension. Tension creates the need for relief. And relief often comes in the form of spending. It's an emotional cycle. When you create a specific portion for living, even if it's small, you remove guilt from the equation. It's allowed, and when you know it's allowed, you don't feel the need to overdo it. Now, let me touch on a delicate point. Many times, you don't disorganize your finances because of a lack of money. You disorganize because of fear of the future. Fear makes you think you need to enjoy now because tomorrow might not exist. That thought is silent but powerful. It makes you act as if you're always on the edge of losing everything. This happens especially when you've already gone through hardship. Anyone who has been without money develops a kind of permanent alert system, and that's not weakness, it's defense. The problem is that living in constant defense prevents you from building. Managing your money efficiently is teaching your mind that you're no longer at that critical point, that now there's a plan, that now there's structure. And that doesn't happen with motivational phrases. It happens with repeated organization. Another silent trap is comparing your life to other people's. You open social media and see people traveling, buying, investing, growing, and you start to feel behind, but you don't see the backstage. You don't see the debt, the pressure, the risk. You only see the edited result. When you feel behind, you tend to rush decisions, and rush decisions almost always cost a lot. You jump into something you don't understand. You buy something you didn't need. You take on a payment that limits your freedom for years, all to try to reduce an internal feeling of falling behind. But financial efficiency isn't speed. It's consistency. It's doing the basics right for long enough that the cumulative effect begins to show. Maybe today you feel like you're making a huge effort and going nowhere. You work, pay, solve problems, and the balance looks the same. That creates a sense of injustice. I do everything right and still don't move forward. But sometimes the problem isn't effort, it's direction. If you're always putting out fires, you never get to build. If every month there's an unexpected expense that turns into debt, it means your foundation is still fragile. And there's no shame in admitting that. It's maturity. There's a huge difference between living on a low income and living disorganized. Low income limits your speed. Disorganization destroys your stability. Even earning little. When there's clarity, there's control. And control reduces anxiety. Now think about the last time an unexpected expense came up. What did you feel first? Anger, fear, desperation. That feeling shows how your structure is. When your emergency fund starts growing consistently, even slowly, those feelings decrease. The problem still exists, but it doesn't dominate you. And here is the central point that transforms everything. Organized money is freedom to react. You don't control the world. You don't control crises. You don't control price increases. But you can control your capacity to respond, and that capacity is born from predictability. Predictability doesn't mean nothing bad will happen. It means that when it does, you won't go into emotional collapse. Maybe you're realizing now that the biggest weight you carry isn't the bill itself. It's the constant tension, the silent fear, the feeling that any mistake could bring everything down. Managing your money efficiently is reducing that weight little by little. It's replacing improvisation with structure. It's replacing shock with simple planning. It's replacing guilt with clarity. And I need you to understand something very important. There is no sustainable financial transformation without emotional transformation. If you don't change the way you see money, you'll keep repeating old patterns even if you earn more. Because someone who doesn't know how to organize low will get lost with a lot. In the next section, I'm going to dive deeper into how to build a simple, practical, realistic system that works even for those who earn little, even for those who have made many mistakes, even for those who feel behind in life. But before continuing, answer yourself honestly. Do you just want more money, or do you want peace with money? Now pay attention. because this is where everything starts to take practical shape, not the beautiful theory version, but the version that works in real life for someone who wakes up early, commutes, solves problems, and comes home exhausted. The first thing you need to accept is that managing your money efficiently doesn't start by increasing your income. It starts by accepting exactly where you are today. No excuses, no comparisons. You need to look at your financial reality as it is, not as you wish it were. Because while you avoid looking, you live in the dark. And in the dark, any noise becomes a threat. Grab a piece of paper or open a note on your phone and answer a simple question. How much does it cost to keep your basic life running each month? I'm not talking about extra comfort. I'm talking about the minimum for your home to stay standing. Housing, food, transportation, essential bills. That's it. When you put that number on paper, something powerful happens. Fear starts to lose strength because it stops being imaginary. Many people live with anxiety because they don't know that number. So any unexpected event feels gigantic. But when you know that your base costs, for example, $2,000 per month, your mind begins working with something concrete. You stop fighting an invisible monster. Now comes the part that changes the game. Your first goal is not investing, not multiplying, not doubling your net worth. Your first goal is building minimum stability. And minimum stability means having at least the equivalent of 1 month of your basic costs saved. Not because that solves everything, but because it changes your mental posture. When you know that if something happens, you won't immediately collapse, your mind begins leaving survival mode. And when you leave survival mode, you make better decisions. Maybe you're thinking, but I can barely pay my bills. How am I supposed to save a whole month? And this is where efficiency appears. It's not about saving fast. It's about saving consistently. Even if it's a small amount, even if it feels painfully slow, the secret isn't the initial quantity. It's automatic repetition. If every month, before anything else, you separate a fixed amount for your security, you're building something that doesn't depend on motivation. It depends on system. And system is simple. Money comes in, automatically a portion goes to your emergency fund. It's non-negotiable. It's not what's left over. It's what stays first, even if you need to adjust other areas. Because if you always leave the emergency fund for last, it will always lose. But here's an important caution. You can't turn your emergency fund into a prison. If you save everything and live suffocated, you'll quit. That's why, after separating survival and security, you need a clear portion for living. And living doesn't mean extreme luxury. It means breathing. It means being able to go out without guilt. It means buying something simple without feeling like you're destroying your future. When you don't separate that portion, you create internal conflict. And internal conflict is exhausting. And when you're exhausted, you compensate. And when you compensate, you overspend. Now, I want to touch on something almost no one admits. Often you're not disorganized because of a lack of money. You're disorganized because you try to fix everything at once. You want to pay off debt, save, invest, help family, improve your lifestyle all in the same month. And that creates frustration because you can't make visible progress in any direction. Efficiency is focus. If you're in high interest debt, your priority is eliminating that because interest is a silent leak. While you try to build savings with interest eroding your money, you're bailing water from a sinking boat. First you fix the leak, then you build the structure. If you don't have serious debt, then your priority is building your foundation. One thing at a time. It's not glamorous. It's not social media worthy, but it's what truly works. Another essential point. Stop trusting your memory. Memory fails. You think you spend little on small things, but when you add it up at the end of the month, it's more than you imagined. You don't need a complicated spreadsheet. Just track every expense for 30 days. No judgment, just observation. Because when you see it on paper, you gain awareness. And awareness is power. You begin to notice patterns. You see that you spend more when you're stressed, that you buy more when you're sad, that you order more takeout when you're tired. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about understanding your behavior. Efficient control is financial self. Now imagine your life 6 months after applying this consistently. Your basic cost part of your money goes automatically to savings. You have a portion you can use without guilt. You know exactly where your money is going. When an unexpected expense shows up, you don't panic. You handalit. That changes your posture. You negotiate better at work because you're no longer afraid of everything. You think before taking on a new payment. You evaluate calmly. And here's something almost no one notices. When you stop acting out of desperation, you start seeing opportunities that were previously invisible. A course that could increase your income. An important conversation that could open a door. A strategic change that once seemed too risky. Money stops being a source of tension and becomes a decision-making tool. Maybe today you're still at the beginning. Maybe your emergency fund is small. Maybe you're still putting out fires. But if you start applying this simple, consistent, realistic system, something inside you will change even before your balance grows significantly. You'll feel control, and control creates peace. And peace creates clarity, and clarity improves decisions. And better decisions build the future. Do you see how it doesn't start with the number? It starts with the mental structure. Now I'm going to move into the next 2 chapters, diving deeper into how to maintain discipline when discouragement hits, how to deal with financial setbacks without emotionally destroying yourself, and how to turn this organization into gradual income growth without anxiety. Now we enter a decisive part, because organizing is hard, but staying organized when life gets tight is the real challenge. There is an inevitable moment in this journey when you'll feel discouraged. It might be after 3 months of doing everything right and an unexpected expense consumes part of your emergency fund. It might be after weeks of controlling spending and on a bad day you spend more than you should. It might be when you look at your balance and feel like it's growing too slowly. And that's exactly when many people quit. The problem isn't making mistakes. The problem is turning a mistake into identity. You slip once and immediately think, I never get it right. I'm just disorganized. There's no point in trying. That internal dialogue destroys more than any isolated expense. Efficient control doesn't mean perfection. It means imperfect consistency. You don't need to get it right every month. You need to return to the plan every time you drift from it. That's the difference between people who live in endless cycles of chaos and those who build stability over time. Let's imagine a real situation. You managed to save the equivalent of 1 month of your basic cost. You felt proud, you felt secure. Then a car problem, a medical expense, something consumes half your savings. The initial feeling is frustration. It feels like you went backward, but look at what changed before that problem would have turned into debt. It would have generated interest. It would have created months of pressure. Now, it became logistics. You used the emergency fund for what it was designed for. That's not regression. That's the system working. Emotionally, though, it hurts. Because seeing the balance drop triggers that old fear of loss. And this is where you need to remember, your emergency fund is not a trophy. It's not a number to admire. It's a tool to use when necessary. When you understand that deeply, you stop treating saved money as something sacred and untouchable. It's there to protect your peace, not to create anxiety. Now let's talk about setbacks. Maybe you've been organized for weeks and suddenly, in a moment of stress, you make an impulsive purchase. At the time, it feels justified. Later comes the weight, the guilt, the feeling that you've sabotaged everything. If you turn that mistake into learning, it strengthens your system. If you turn it into guilt, it destroys it. Ask yourself, what was I feeling when I made that choice? Exhaustion, anger, sadness, loneliness. Many financial decisions aren't about money. They're about unresolved emotion. When you start identifying those patterns, you gain power. Maybe you realize you spend more when you feel undervalued at work. Maybe after arguments at home. Maybe when you feel out of control in other areas of life. Money becomes an escape valve. Managing your money efficiently means creating other ways to deal with those emotions. It's not about becoming cold. It's about not using your credit card as anesthesia. Another fundamental piece is adjusting expectations. Real financial growth is slow at first. Very slow. It feels like nothing is changing. But what's changing is invisible. Your mindset, your discipline, your clarity. At the beginning, it feels like you're sacrificing a lot for a little visible result. but that period builds a solid foundation. It's like pouring the foundation of a house. It doesn't show in the photo, but it supports everything. If you quit at that stage, you return to the old cycle. If you persist, even with small progress, you begin entering a new pattern. Now, let's talk about income growth without anxiety. Many people think they need to double their salary overnight. They don't. They need to gradually improve their ability to generate value. When your financial life is minimally organized, you can think about growth strategically. Maybe taking an affordable course that increases your chances of promotion. Maybe learning a simple skill that creates extra income. Maybe negotiating your current position better. But notice, all of that requires mental clarity. If you're drowning in worry, you can take planned growth. You can only try to survive. That's why the emergency fund and basic organization come first. They create mental space, and mental space is what allows expansion. Another trap you need to avoid is increasing your lifestyle every time your income increases. This silent mistake keeps many people stuck. Earn more, spend more, never build a solid base. If your income grows, the first thing that should grow is your security, then your investments. Only after that, your lifestyle. That order protects your future. And I know sometimes an enormous fatigue hits. It feels like you're always thinking about money, like you can never fully relax. But there's a difference between obsession and organization. When the system works, you don't have to think about it all the time. It runs on its own. You review once a week, adjust once a month. The rest of the time, you live. The ultimate goal isn't to control every cent with tension. It's to create an environment where money doesn't dominate your thoughts. Imagine waking up and not feeling that automatic tightness in your chest when you remember your bills. Imagine opening your banking app without fear. Imagine receiving an unexpected expense and thinking, okay, I'll handle it. That is mental freedom, and mental freedom is the real goal of efficient financial control. Maybe you're still far from that. Maybe you're just beginning. But if you keep applying these simple principles, know your basic cost, separate survival, security, and life. Automate what you can, track expenses for awareness. Learn from setbacks without guilt. You're already building something many people never build. Emotional stability with money. And in the end, it's not about getting rich quickly. It's about stopping living in constant tension. It's about transforming money from an invisible enemy into a silent ally. If you made it this far, I want to ask you for 3 simple things. First, leave your like because it helps this content reach more people who are living this same financial anxiety in silence. Second, subscribe to the channel because here we talk about money in a real way, no fantasy. No easy promises, just practical organization and mental change. And third, comment the word control below. If you comment control, I'll know you stayed until the end and decided to take command of your financial life with awareness and strategy.